any other law enforcement agency. This division, with its many files filled with registrations of valuable property such as silverware, jewelry, guns, bicycles, with its mug files filled with pictures of thousands of criminals, with its files of thousands upon thousands of fingerprints, with its files of criminal records furnished by the Department of Justice, is always ready at any moment to furnish valuable information and thus aid in the apprehension or identification of a criminal. This is a busy division of the police department. "24 hours of every day, reports must be indexed and filed, fingerprints checked or classified, records must be maintained in such a manner that they're readily available at all times." The fingerprint expert receives the photographs of the latent prints and is given a list of possible suspects by the detective. He obtains the fingerprints of the suspect from the file and goes about the task of comparing them with the latent prints. After the print is viewed through the magnifying glass, one by one, suspects are eliminated until the right one is found. Here he sees that the general pattern is a loop, and that's the type he's looking for. The relative location of core and delta are about the same in each. He checks the intersecting ridges, islands, ridge endings, and bifurcations. If he's able to establish as many as 12 points of comparison that are identical, identification is certain. In this instance, many more are apparent. In many instances, the distance between points of comparison is important, and for this reason, the fixed focus fingerprint camera was invented. It takes photographs actual size, and measurements on the resultant pictures are accurate. Having satisfied himself that the latent fingerprints and those of the suspect are identical, he writes a short report to the detective assigned. The fact that the burglar has been identified through fingerprints is beyond doubt vitally important, but not important enough to cause the experienced officer to jump to the conclusion that the case is in the bag. In fact, it only spurs him on to greater efforts. He knows that the chain of evidence which he builds up must be insurmountable. The experience which he has had has taught him that juries are composed of persons who do not have all the technical knowledge officers possess, and therefore are not as readily convinced by just one point of evidence. Each fact must be substantiated. The detective, after obtaining a mug of the suspect, Joe Dope, returns to the home of the witness and has him view it. The witness, wishing not to make a mistake, studies the picture carefully before making his decision. Yes, that is the man whom he saw leaving the premises. With the identity of the burglar verified by two sources, the detective causes a radio log form to be made by the secretary, who immediately after filling out this form causes it to be sent through the carrier tube system to the office of the radio dispatcher. On arrival at the tube station, the dispatcher removes the log form from the carrier and broadcasts the description of the suspect: age, weight, height, color of hair and eyes, and clothing he was wearing at the time last seen, and the information that Joe Doak is wanted in connection with the burglary. This message is received by all patrolmen on the street, and for the information of all members of the department not on active duty at the time of the broadcast, a pickup is executed and posted at headquarters. Pickups are read to the patrolmen by the commanding officer of each detail when they next report for duty. Within a short time, a detective who has been shown a photograph of the suspect observes a man on the street who answers the description and whom he is reasonably sure is the suspect. He shadows this man. His acts are governed entirely by the movements of the suspect, and he must speculate constantly on the suspect's next move. The detective sees this suspect enter a beer parlor. Let us watch him. Indolently, he saunters to the bar and obtains some change, part of which he uses in the cigarette machine. Turning back to the bar, he tears open the package, carelessly throwing parts of the wrapper on the floor. After having lighted his cigarette, he reaches over and punches an acquaintance on the shoulder. He just couldn't stand not being noticed. Unsuspecting, he saunters back toward the door. The detective, not being sure of the suspect's identity, strolls by the beer parlor and stops to ponder the situation. As he does so, the detective assigned to the case happens to drive up. Immediately, they go into a huddle. The detective assigned keeps watch while the other detective drives the car around the corner so that it will be out of sight and not arouse the suspicion of the suspect. After a short wait, the suspect comes out of the beer parlor and starts down the street. The detective assigned shadows him. The detective intends to wait until his co-worker returns, and then they will stop this man for questioning. The suspect turns the corner and starts jaywalking toward a car. As he starts to get into the car, the detective decides to act. He steps up and taps the suspect on the shoulder and makes his identity known. Without warning, the suspect goes into action. He pulls a revolver, but this officer has been trained for just such an emergency. Without hesitation, he acts, grasping the arm, holding the gun with both hands. With lightning-like speed, he forces the arm forward with a snap that throws the gun clear. Following through, he pins the arms behind the man's back and places the handcuffs on his wrist. Before the suspect can realize what is happening, he's securely shackled. The other detective, after having driven around the block, arrives on the scene, and the suspect is loaded into a police car. There he waits while the detectives search his car. They find a tire tool, a likely instrument with which to jimmy a window or door. They raise the hood and check the motor number. The car may be stolen. Nothing is left undone by these officers. The two detectives bring the suspect to the station and place him in the booking room adjacent to the desk sergeant's office. This is a room with two doors, each controlled with an electric lock which is operated from the desk. Controls are out of reach of those within the room. The detective has a short talk with the suspect, ascertaining where he works, where he lives, and tries to learn who his associates are. The suspect reluctantly says he's unemployed, refuses to name any associates, and gives his address only after the detective has convinced him that they will find out sooner or later and the investigation will take less time, and he'll get out of jail sooner if he's innocent, provided he gives them the information desired. Reluctantly, he tells them he lives in a certain local hotel. Here the desk sergeant books the prisoner, obtaining from the arresting officer information as to the place and time of arrest, names of all arresting officers, and the charge to be filed. From the prisoner, he obtains his name, address, age, occupation, and place of birth. The prisoner is then searched by the turnkey, and all his personal property is taken from him except tobacco and cigarettes. He's given a receipt for his property. It will be returned to him upon his release. All property is taken from every prisoner because of many reasons. Some prisoners who have been placed in jail complain that other prisoners stole money or valuables from them. Others have used nail files or pocket combs in their attempts at suicide. Some unsuspecting object may be used as a means to effect an escape. Prisoners have no use for property other than tobacco and cigarettes while in jail. All other items are taken from them and kept in a safe place. The prisoner is then placed in the elevator, which has no exit except to the jail on the second floor. The turnkey takes him to the jail quarters, where he is placed in the mudroom for the purpose of having photographs and fingerprints taken. The prisoner is required to sign the fingerprint cards, and two sets of prints are taken, one to be placed in the local files and the other to be sent to the FBI in Washington, D.C., where they will be checked against their criminal records. The local department will be notified if the subject has been arrested previously anywhere in the United States or in any foreign country. Accompanying the fingerprint card is a form which lists the prisoner's age, height, weight, color of hair, marks or scars and peculiarities, and the name and address of 3 of his near relatives. He is then mugged with a number, if you please, showing 2 views, one from the front and the other in profile. Turnkeys are trained in the use of the mugging camera, and all mug pictures are uniform. If a prisoner has been mugged prior to the last year or so, he's mugged again to obtain a more recent picture. However, the original mug number is used on each picture. The prisoner is next confined in an escape-proof jail to wait further developments. The gun which the detective took from Joe Doak and a tire tool which was found in the car, plus a few hairs which were taken from the hat worn by the suspect, are delivered to the laboratory. The detective explains to the technician what connection they are thought to have with the case and requests that the necessary tests and comparisons be made. Armed with the necessary search warrant, the detectives go to the hotel mentioned by the prisoner and check the register. They find that one Joe Doak was registered in room number 9. Proprietors of hotels and rooming houses are usually very cooperative with police, and this landlady is no exception, for she readily leads the officers to room number 9, occupied by Joe Doak. The officers have explained the situation to her, and with her cooperation, it is not necessary to make use of the warrant. They do inform her that there is one in existence which will protect her in the event of any complaint. Once inside the room, the detectives begin searching for evidence. One discovers an old sweater, likely piece of evidence, while the other discovers the reported loot in a dresser drawer, the watch, the gun, and the ring. Remembering the cast of the footprints at the scene of the burglary, one of the detectives examines the shoes found in the room. 2 pairs don't seem to resemble the cast. But here's a pair that does. The detective examines the suitcases for additional evidence, and finally, when the search is ended, a small box is obtained in which to carry the evidence to the police laboratory, where it will be checked and identified. The evidence found in the room is taken directly to the laboratory and turned over to the technician. The detective points out the connection between the articles submitted and the evidence in the case. He refers to the shoe and asks that it be checked against the cast of the footprint. He points out a small tear in the side of the sweater and requests that it be checked against the fibers found at the scene of the burglary. The detective next questions the suspect. He now has definite proof that Joe Doak is the man who burglarized the house, but in order to save the time and expense involved in a court hearing, he attempts to get an admission and induce Joe Doak to enter a plea of guilty. If the case must be heard in court, many dollars of taxpayers' money will be spent for witness fees, jury fees, and court records. Then, too, much of the time of the detective will be taken up which could be spent in the solution of other crimes. The detective discloses only enough to convince the suspect that he has enough evidence to convict him. Most of the evidence is held in reserve to be used in court if necessary. He reveals that the stolen property has been recovered. This Joe Doak has probably already guessed. The loot, consisting of ring, pistol, and watch, are shown to the prisoner. In reply to questions as to how they came to be in his room, Joe Doak merely replies that he does not know anything about them. Once a man has served a sentence in any penal institution, he becomes hardened, and the task of questioning him on another case is more difficult. The questioning must be done without use of violence or undue harshness. There is no such thing as the third degree, so far as this department is concerned. Statements secured under such methods are usually repudiated in court, and their admission as evidence is denied. So after spending hours of questioning without results, Doak is taken to the polygraph operator for a test. Let's listen in and see what goes on.
Your name is Joe Doak, is that right?
Yes.
You're under arrest on suspicion of burglary, is that correct, Joe?
Yes.
I'm the polygraph operator for the department here, Joe. I want to give you a polygraph test, a lie detector test. Are you willing to take a lie detector test about your activities in regard to this burglary?
It's okay with me.
We've used the polygraph several thousand times in the last 8 or 10 years on the subject where the innocence was protested. Now, if you're innocent of a burglary charge, Joe, I'm just as anxious to prove it as I am to prove that you're guilty if you are guilty. I don't know whether you're familiar with the lie detector technique or not. I'll tell you a little about it before we take the test, if you're willing to take it, as you indicate. I have prepared a series of questions here that I'm going to ask you. Now, please bear in mind that they are merely questions. I'm not accusing you of anything. I want you to answer these questions simply by saying yes or no. I'm not going to be tough with you. I don't want you to be tough with me. Your yes or no answer to these questions will suffice just as well as a very emphatic yes or no. Now, as you answer these questions, I'm going to take a recording of your blood pressure and your pulse and your respiration. And from that recording, after it's completed, I'm going to determine whether or not you're telling the truth in answer to these questions. Now, there are a few little things I'd like for you to do to ensure this test being successful. I want you to sit perfectly still, face the wall right straight ahead of you there, and cooperate with me in answering the questions simply by yes or no. Are you willing to do that?
Sure. I'll play games with you. Do you want me to play drop the handkerchief next?
Now, wait a minute, Joe. I have a little information that you may have been playing drop the handkerchief. Is there anything to that?
I don't think so.
Well, suppose we just let that remark pass for the time. Now, remember, as I ask these questions, just answer by saying yes or no. Sit perfectly still. And give this scientific instrument a chance to prove you're being honest about the thing, if you are being honest about it. Believe me, that's the purpose of the test, to determine whether or not you're telling the truth. Your name is Joe Doak?
Yes.
Wichita?
Yes.
Did you ever burglarize the house?
No.
Did you burglarize the house last night?
No.
Have you been married?
Yes.
Did you take a watch out of a house last night?
No.
Did you take a ring from the house last night?
No.
Sit perfectly still, please, Joe. The success of the test depends on your cooperation, just remember. Do you have some stolen property in your room now, Joe?
No.
Have you told me the truth throughout this examination?
Yes.
Now sit perfectly still for just a minute longer, Joe, while I get your normal blood pressure and respiratory reactions, and then the test will have been finished.
Whenever a gun comes into the possession of the police, it is examined to determine whether or not it's been used in some previous shooting case. In making the examination, a test bullet must first be obtained. The laboratory technician inspects the gun found in possession of Joe Dept. Making sure that it's not loaded, that the cylinder is free of foreign objects, and that there are no obstructions in the barrel, he selects a shell from his supply and places it in the chamber. Although there are several shots to be fired, only one shell is placed in the gun at a time. This prevents the possibility of accidental discharge. The gun is then fired into a bullet recovery box, a box packed with waste. The waste stops the force of the bullet and at the same time prevents it being damaged by contact with hard surfaces. The empty shell case is removed from the gun and carefully preserved. In the recovery box, pieces of cardboard are placed in the waste every few inches. In this way, the approximate location of the bullet can be determined by observing the cardboard partitions penetrated. The technician can then search through the small bit of waste directly behind the last card penetrated and locate the bullet. Care must be used in handling the sample. If it is dropped, some of the minute identification marks may be damaged. As soon as it is removed, he uses a scribe to mark the identification on the nose of the bullet. In this way, he makes sure he can identify the bullet at a later date. The shell case is marked in the same way, the mark being placed inside the mouth of the shell. The two samples are then wrapped in cotton separately and placed in a small box on which information is written as to the make, model, type, and serial number of the gun from which they are fired. They are then placed in a special filing cabinet and kept there under lock and key. They will be used for future comparisons. Bullets obtained in this manner are valuable in determining what type gun other bullets were fired from. When a shooting case occurs and the bullet is removed, that bullet is filed away and preserved until the case is completely cleared and disposed of. As long as the case remains unsolved, every gun which comes into the possession of the police that could possibly have fired the bullet is carefully checked. Checking through the file, the technician finds a shooting case in which a .38 caliber pistol was used. As the gun taken from Dept was a .38 caliber, he obtains the evidence bullet from the file and proceeds to make the comparison. For this purpose, he makes use of the comparison microscope, a specially designed instrument through which portions of two objects can be viewed side by side at the same time. It has one eyepiece and two objectives. One of the bullets is placed in each. One bullet is brought into focus and properly aligned with one of the landmarks in view. The other bullet is then brought into focus and aligned, and is then slowly rotated. Each of the landmarks around its circumference is compared with the marks on the other bullet. If a bullet has 6 lands and grooves, then a total of 36 combinations are compared before the examination is complete. The direction of the twist, the number of lands and grooves, their width and depth, and the microscopic lines in each mark are all taken into consideration in making this test. If the bullets were fired from the same gun, the lines in one bullet would intersect the dividing line and continue on through the other bullet just as though they were one. When the technician sees a pattern like this, he is sure that both bullets came from the same gun. The bullet from the Doak gun did not match with the evidence, so Joe Doak is spared a murder charge. There is but one chance in many thousands that any two marks on two different bullets will be identical, but when as many as 15 such marks are found to be alike on two bullets, the identification becomes almost positive. Again, even though there should be two guns in existence bearing identical markings, the possibility of this particular investigator examining both guns would be small indeed. Here is a close-up view of the comparison microscope. From the small tear in the side of the sweater found in Joe Doak's room, a few fibers are removed. These are mounted on a slide and placed under one objective of the comparison microscope. The evidence fibers from the scene of the burglary are placed under the other objective, and both are brought into focus. You'll notice that in each half of the image there are both fine and coarse fibers, and that all have approximately the same form. That is, all are curled up to about the same degree. This curling is the result of the weaving and indicates that both specimens came from a garment of the same type weave in this case, a loose weave garment. The variety in sizes of the fibers indicates that both specimens are from the same grade material. The specimen taken from the sweater will now be examined under the regular microscope to ascertain if the scale structure, type, and color are the same. It will be remembered that when the first specimen was examined, it was found that the fibers were of tan color and from a wool garment. In making this test, the technician is able to determine that the fibers are from the same garment. The very small particles of foreign matter clinging to the fibers, when examined under high power, also assist in the identification of the garment. The hair taken from the suspect's hat by the detective is placed on a slide. This slide with the one bearing the hair removed from the pocket comb found at the scene are placed on the microscope stage side by side. By sliding them back and forth, the technician examines first one and then the other. This comparison cannot be made under the comparison microscope because it's a low power scope and greater magnification is required to examine the scale structure of hair and to measure it accurately. The hair is examined for colors, scale structure, structure of the root, and the size and shape of the cut end. The size at various points along the length of the two hairs can be measured with the micrometer eyepiece. The technician will be able to state the two hairs probably came from the same head. Comparison is made between the cast of the footprint found at the scene of the burglary and the shoe found in Joe Doak's room. In examining the shoe in the cast, it's found that in the sole of the shoe there is a worn place corresponding with the mark on the cast. The run-down heel is in a similar location and to a similar degree. The toe is turned up on each, and the trademarks and non-skid pattern of the heel are worn away to about the same degree. There can be very little doubt but that this is the shoe that made the print. A comparison is made between the cast of the tool marks and a tire tool found in Joe Doak's car. The technician sees that the bit of the tool is battered badly and that this peculiarity exactly matches the depressed portion at the end of the cast. The corners of the tool are rounded so that they fit into the cast snugly. The slope of the sides of the tool cast are identical with the tire tool. There is a strong possibility that this is the tool which made the marks on the window. Informed of the findings of the laboratory technician and backed by the results of the polygraph test, the detective resumes his questioning of the suspect. He again points out that the stolen property was recovered in the prisoner's room. The detective makes every effort to point out to the suspect that the evidence against him is conclusive and tries to induce him to confess to save trial expense and even goes so far as to offer recommendations of leniency. But when a suspect persistently refuses to tell the truth, officers feel that if and when the suspect is freed, he will do the same thing again. So the only thing to do to protect society against such a criminal is to keep him confined as long as possible. First offender can frequently be reformed, but as a rule, there is no hope for the old offender. They will never be anything but a criminal. Apparently, this is the case with Joe Dope, for he refuses to admit anything. The detective calls for the polygraph record and when it's brought in, lays it in before the suspect. The operator then goes into detail to explain why, in his opinion, Doak is not telling the truth about the burglary. Blood pressure is controlled by a nerve center in the brain, and when deception is practiced, this nerve center acts on the adrenaline glands, causing the pressure to rise. This rise is registered on the polygraph chart. A like reaction is seen in the respiration, and the more the subject tries to suppress it, the more emphasized it becomes. The operator here points out these upward trends, which exactly correspond with pertinent questions regarding the burglary. To irrelevant questions, there is no reaction. Interpretation of these reactions by the experienced operator is like a high school student reading ABC. They make every effort to point out to Doak that they know he's not telling the truth, but he still insists that he knows nothing about the case. The detective obtains the tire tool and demonstrates to the suspect how, in his opinion, the tool was used in prying open the window, but still only a staunch denial. Joe Doak isn't talking. The detective, in another attempt to break down the prisoner, produces the gun which Joe Doak had pulled on him. "Where'd you get this gun?" he asks. But Joe Doak simply says he got it from a stranger in a pool hall. The detective reminds him that the gun is numbered and the ownership will be traced. "Okay, Joe," says the detective, "we're bringing charges against you and you'll have to take the consequences." In a final attempt to obtain a confession, the prisoner is confronted by the captain of detectives. Let's listen.
Now, Mr. Doak, you've been arrested in connection with a house burglary at 1127 South Minnesota. And in your room we found these articles that have been identified as coming from that home. We have your shoes taken from your room, which matches perfectly the cast made at the window where this house was entered. Now, at the time you're in that house, you handled this mare. You left your fingerprints, which matches perfectly the fingerprints on this car, which are yours. At the time you left the house, you snagged your sweater on the catch to the back door. Now, from that catch, I have taken fibers, which matches perfectly your sweater. Now, if need be, we can compare the hair that's taken from the comb you dropped in that house with the hair on your head. Also, we have some blood scraping taken from the window sill where you cut your hand the time you entered this place. Now, what do you say?
What can anybody say?
Then you're ready to give us some confession? Admit this crime?
Yeah, I done the job. I'll confess.
All right, sir.
While incarcerated in jail, awaiting transfer to the penitentiary, the prisoner nonchalantly lights his last cigarette. He begins to think of the long sentence he faces. Joe should have thought about this before. Society will be protected from this burglar for a while at least. For the thief who breaks into your home or steals your property. They're trained to look after homes where the occupants are reported to be away, as well as to watch over the homes that are occupied and observe suspicious actions on the part of persons roaming at large. These officers are sworn to protect the life and property and maintain the peace. Yet in spite of this vigilance on the part of police, there are a few who are bound to slip through. When we consider that for about every 1,500 persons there is but one policeman, it is obvious that they cannot observe everyone nor catch every law violator in the act. So when one does slip through, it becomes the duty of the police officer to make a thorough investigation, collect all available evidence, and effect the apprehension of the culprit. Here are a few scenes to show you what happens when one of these burglars does succeed in running the gauntlet of the police patrol system. This is a typical moderate residential section of the class most likely to fall prey to the house prowler. No traffic, little activity around the dwellings, the house apparently deserted for the day. In the rear we see a growth of shrubs which will hide him from the view of neighbors across the way. No activity and the absence of an alleyway to the rear. This is an ideal setting for the house prowler. Sneaking between the houses, keeping a close watch for any chance passers-by who might observe his action, he approaches the rear of the house. This burglar works during the daylight hours while the men are at work, children at school, and the mistress of the house is doing her shopping. With an iron bar, which has been carefully concealed under his clothing, he forces the screen. The end of the bar embeds itself in the soft wood. The screen is then lifted from its hanger and placed on the ground beside the house. With the screen out of the way, he breaks the window out directly over the latch. The lower sash fits tightly and the jemmy is used again. Up goes the window. He climbs in, getting out of sight quickly. The tool marks on the screen and windowsill, contacts of hands and clothing with these surfaces as he climbs in, and the broken glass are all potential clues. He scratches his hand as he reaches to unlatch the window. In pulling out a handkerchief to wrap around his hand, he drops his pocket coat. Another piece of evidence to be collected up. He moves cautiously through the house, making no noise. He goes to the back door, unlocks it and opens it, making sure there is some means of making exit. Then he continues through the house. For escape, this burglar depends on easy exit and swiftness in flight. Satisfied there is no one in the house, he returns the tool to its carrying place and starts searching for valuables. Burglars have their own individual ideas about the value of property they steal. Some steal only money because other property is too easily identified. Others take money and jewelry. Still others steal clothing. There is a superstitious lot and believe that the commission of certain acts may cause them to be caught. They seldom go armed with any weapon other than a tool to be used in gaining entrance. Valuables stolen by burglars are usually found in bedrooms. There, jewelry, guns, clothing, and money are kept. Prowling through drawers and cabinets hurriedly, most any burglar is careless in his haste. He becomes impatient with pushing things about in the dresser drawer and dumps the contents on the bed. Better to look them over for articles of value. He fingers through them, selecting articles which he thinks are saleable and pockets them. In the process, his fingers come in contact with articles of no momentary value, but which may register his fingerprints. Every article in this lot will be checked by the police. Nothing will be overlooked. It might serve to establish the identity of this thief. His search completed, he sneaks through the house to the open back door. In passing through, his sweater catches on a protruding nail in the jamb, and in freeing it, the handkerchief, which was wrapped around his hand, is dropped, but he doesn't take time to recover it. He leaves just as a neighbor is returning home. They see each other at the same time, and the prowler starts running. The neighbor looks him over. His actions are suspicious, so he takes a second look. He'll probably be able to furnish officers with a good description and may be able to identify him. Later that afternoon, the housewife returns from her shopping tour, never suspecting that anything is amiss. She unlocks the door and enters, depositing her packages and hat in the living room. She starts for another part of the house. Passing the bedroom door, she glances in and notices the disarray of articles on the bed. She sees the drawers pulled out, the cabinet doors are open, and knows at once that a prowler has been there. Without hesitation, she goes to the phone and calls police headquarters. To save time, the list of emergency numbers in the front of the book is referred to. She dials, and the call is answered by the PBX operator. There is an operator on duty 24 hours a day to receive emergency calls. She relays the call to the desk sergeant, who receives all calls and complaints and decides if the importance justifies dispatching one or more officers to the scene immediately. When this is done, he obtains as much information as the victim is able to give, obtaining the name, address, nature of the case, and other details. He will make a case card and a permanent record, which will be filed in the record office. As soon as he obtains the necessary information, without waiting to complete his conversation with the victim, he communicates with the dispatcher by way of the inter-office communication system, informing him of the fact that there has been a burglary at a certain address and advising him to send officers there immediately. With the officers on the way, he completes his conversation with the victim, obtaining all available information from her and making notes as he goes. He is interested in the case. That is his job. He will take whatever action the case may call for. He is attentive, polite, and courteous. By the time the victim has completed her conversation with the desk sergeant, the beat officer pulls into the driveway. He has been dispatched by radio. He is admitted by the housewife and is immediately shown to the bedroom where the disorder is in evidence. This officer has been trained to protect the scene until the investigator arrives. When the victim starts to pick up an article from the bed, he warns her not to handle anything. It is the duty of the beat officer to see that nothing is molested until the investigation is completed and to obtain all the necessary information concerning the case. He takes notes of the surrounding conditions. Drawers are pulled out, contents of the drawers dumped on the bed, and the broken glass on the floor. The victim then shows him outside, to the window where entrance was gained, pointing out the damage to the window, tool marks on the ledge, the screen on the ground beside the window, and the imprint of a shoe under the window where the ground has been loosened in making a flower bed. He will make no effort to collect any evidence of any kind, merely making notes of what he observes and calling the attention of the investigator to the evidence. The investigator is a uniformed officer who is trained in the technique of searching for, collecting, and preserving physical evidence. He drives a car which is equipped with all the necessary paraphernalia for properly doing his job, including fingerprint equipment and casting materials. One of his first acts is to make a survey of the scene, tracing the route of the burglary as nearly as possible. In doing this, he comes to the open rear door. He finds the handkerchief on the floor. He sees that it has stains which appear to be blood. It is carefully picked up. On closer observation, he notices a small bit of fiber clinging to the head of a protruding nail in the door jamb. It is removed and placed in a glass vial. The beat officer's next step is to canvass the neighborhood in an effort to locate witnesses who can give even the slightest bit of information. One of them may have heard the glass break and have a fairly accurate recollection of the time. This would serve to more accurately fix the exact time the burglary occurred. There may have been other houses entered, and the victim may be slow in reporting it. Suspicious characters may have been seen in the neighborhood. The officer will include in his report the name and address of each person interviewed so that the detective assigned will know who has been contacted. The investigator, having surveyed the scene, selects as a starting point the bedroom. The articles on the bed must be checked first, as they are most subject to handling and change. First, a photograph is taken, making a permanent record of the disarrangement as it appeared when he first viewed it. He is equipped to take photographs indoor or out, day or night. He then goes about the job of checking the articles for possible fingerprints. By holding an article in such a manner that the light is reflected at the proper angle, he is able to detect marks and smears which might be fingerprints. If the articles on which these marks appear are small enough to transport easily, they will be taken to the laboratory for further checking. One after another, the articles are checked, some of them being discarded, others placed carefully in a box to be taken to the laboratory. He is very careful not to touch any portion of the surface where latent prints are possible. To do so would either superimpose his own prints on them or would wipe them off, in either case rendering them valueless. Then, too, should a print of his own be left on the articles, it would mean additional work for the fingerprint expert in eliminating his prints. He's been trained in the best and safest method of handling objects which are to be checked for prints. Every article he finds, which has apparently been handled by the intruder, is also checked. Consideration must be given to type of surface and the color of the background. Surfaces which are greasy or damp require special handling. The glazed surface of the chest presents an ideal surface for fingerprints. The powder blower is used to spray the powder lightly over the surface. He then uses a soft bristle brush to remove the surface powder, brushing lightly so as not to remove that which clings to the oil, and there we have the fingerprint. This process is called developing a latent print. Latent means invisible. Here the investigator is developing two prints. One of them is near the edge of the door and almost directly under the handle. The proximity of this handle will prevent the use of the fingerprint camera, so another method must be resorted to, the fingerprint lifting tape. When it is removed, the powder comes with it. Thus the fingerprint is lifted from the surface of the door. The other fingerprint can easily be photographed. The fingerprint camera, a specially designed unit to photograph small objects actual size, is a fixed focus camera, simple to operate. The exposure is the only operation which requires special instructions. It has its own light source and must be shielded from light leakage, which explains the purpose of the black cloth. The beat officer will include in his report the addresses of neighbors he was unable to contact. The detective will contact these persons at a later date. The glass found on the floor and in the baby bed is apparently from the broken window. These shattered pieces are picked up and placed in a newspaper. They will be taken to the laboratory. The investigator inspects each piece as he works, making sure that no fingerprints are destroyed by handling. He overlooks nothing in his effort to collect enough evidence to assure a successful solution of the case. An ordinary pocket comb was found on the floor. Ordinarily, there would be nothing unusual about a comb on a bedroom floor. He inquires of the housewife if she knows anything about it, and she assures him she does not recall ever having seen that particular comb before. The beat officer telephones information to headquarters as soon as he obtains full information from the victim and the neighbors. He dictates his report to a secretary, who makes her notes in shorthand. Essential information is immediately transmitted to the proper person. The secretary will type the information in the form of a report in duplicate and have it ready for the officer to read and sign when he reaches headquarters. The original will be sent to the record division to become a part of the permanent record, and the duplicate will go to the detective assigned. The investigator, having conducted a thorough and extensive search inside the house, turns his attention to the outside. Before making any attempt to examine the window, a plaster cast is made of the footprint so that there will be no danger of the print being destroyed or damaged. The metal frame which the officer is using is adjustable so that it can be made the right length to include all of the footprint and yet not require more plaster than is necessary. The frame is pressed firmly down to prevent the semi-liquid mixture from leaking out. The plaster is mixed to just the right consistency, not too thick to pour easily, yet not too thin to set properly. If this mixture is correct, it will register every detail in the print. A footprint in soft earth will sometimes register worn places on soles, trademarks on rubber heels, and other peculiarities which might be of value in identification. It will register the weave of a stocking or the ridge pattern of the soles of the feet. If the plaster is properly mixed, it will register these details, but if too thick, it may not flow into the small crevices. If too thin, it may crumble to pieces when the officer attempts to pick it up. The first attempt at making the case must be successful, for when lifted out of dirt, adheres to it, and the detail of the print is lost. Footprints have played a big part in the solution of many serious crimes. Plaster can be used to record any third dimension evidence. The investigator takes a photograph showing the broken window, the bottom sash raised, the screen on the ground, and the relative location of the window to the space between the two houses. He's made a survey of the area and has determined that the criminal approached the window by that route. It has been said by experts on legal evidence that one picture will tell more than 500 words of narration. So the investigator takes pictures whenever it appears that an object or a condition photographed may help solve a crime. When the plaster has properly set, and that requires only a few minutes, marks are made on the cast for future identification. Markings made at the time the cast is made leave a rough outline so there can be no question about the marks being made at the time the cast was made. If made after the cast is completely hardened, the outline will be smooth and sharp. The investigator marks on the cast the case number, his own initials, and the date. He also records the exact time on the cast. When it is set sufficiently, he picks up frame and all, and here we have the finished cast. It will be allowed to dry, and then the dirt can be cleaned off and the details of the cast revealed. Included in the investigator's equipment is a supply of ordinary modeling clay, the kind that is used in the schools. This clay contains just enough oil to keep it from hardening. It remains pliable. In some instances, model clay is preferred over plaster because of its elastic properties, such as the cast with tool impressions in wood. The clay is used to record the tool marks in the window frame. It is pressed firmly into the mark, and sufficient clay is used to cover an area at least 1 inch all around the mark. It is then worked gently until it releases and lifted off, care being taken not to distort the impression. Examining the screen, the investigator finds a similar tool mark there, and with the same method takes an impression of it. One of these casts should show the bit of the tool used, and the other should register the outline of the shank. These clay casts are also placed in the box with other evidence. Further inspection of the window ledge reveals a small red spot which resembles blood. This spot is removed by scraping with a knife, and the scrapings are placed in small glass vials. Care is taken to include as little debris and other matter from the ledge as possible. The bottle in which it is placed is labeled with information which will identify it with this case. After rechecking to make sure that all possible evidence has been collected, the investigator places the evidence in the car and replaces its equipment. The evidence must be handled in such a way that it will not be damaged en route to headquarters. Each piece of equipment has its individual place in the car, and it's kept there. Racks are provided to prevent the cases from bouncing around and the equipment from being damaged. This car is inspected daily to see that all equipment is intact, supplies are sufficient, and that every article is in its place. In many instances, evidence must be turned in during the hours when there is no one in the laboratory. For this purpose, lockers are maintained. The locks are left open when not in use, and when the investigator places evidence in them, he snaps the lock shut. Once the lock is snapped shut, no one can open it except the laboratory technician. In doing this, evidence is never misplaced. Any report of a crime which reaches headquarters is immediately communicated to the captain of detectives, whose duty it is to assign a detective to the case and see that proper investigation is made. The desk sergeant notifies him by phone, and he decides on the assignment. He then communicates with the secretary, advising her that he has an assignment for a certain detective. If the detective is not in at the time, he's contacted by radio. He reports in person and is given the information on the case. Immediately upon receipt of the assignment, the detective goes to the scene and contacts the victim. He's been trained in the art of questioning victims to bring out all possible points of evidence and check the loss. He questions her about suspects which she may have in mind, about suspicious persons who have called at the house for any purpose, and about persons who may have had knowledge of the existence of the property stolen. In cases where the loss is unusually large or out of the ordinary, such burglaries are generally traceable to someone who knew the loot was there and how to get it. The detective makes inquiry about the movement and case numbers of the watch stolen, and when she reports that she does not have these numbers, he inquires about any repairs which may have been made on the watch. The jeweler who made the repairs will probably have a record of the numbers. He urges her to make a record of the serial numbers and monograms of all property and to register them at the police station where the numbers and identification will always be available. He also makes inquiry about any additional loss which may have been discovered since the original report. Having obtained all possible information from the victim, he goes to the home of the neighbor whom the beat officer failed contact and is fortunate enough to find him there reading the daily news. He makes his identity known and then informs the neighbor of his mission. This neighbor immediately recalls having seen a strange man come from the house and run down the street. He describes his approach to his home and points out the direction from which the burglar left the premises. When asked for a description, he's able to give a fairly good one. He's about 6 feet tall, weighed about 190 or 200 pounds, dark hair, and was wearing a tan sweater, dark pants, and tan shoes, something like those worn by the detective. He did not get a close look up at the burglar, but believes he'd be able to identify him if he saw him again. After gathering this information from the victim and from the witness, the detective telephones the secretary in the detective division, giving her the details with a description of the suspect. She takes the information in shorthand and types the report. Obviously, not all detectives are typists. Some of them would have a laborious job pecking out a report. As a result, many hours would be spent in writing reports that should be spent on investigation. By dictating the report to the secretary, the officer assures himself of a detailed report, and as a result, more time is allowed for necessary investigations. Report writing has always been the fly in the ointment for every policeman, and yet they are essential for efficient investigation and complete records. When the technician reports for duty, one of his first acts is to check the lockers to see if any evidence was turned in during his absence. He opens the lockers and removes the evidence and takes it to the laboratory, where it is again placed on the lock and key until he's able to start his investigation of the evidence. In developing fingerprints, consideration must be given to the type and color of the surface on which the prints appear. Mirrors present very little difficulty due to the fact that the self-contained lighting in the fingerprint camera is cast across the surface at an angle and does not reflect directly back into the lens. The powder is opaque, so little difficulty is experienced in photographing prints on mirrors, regardless of the powder used. There are numerous methods of developing fingerprints on paper. If the paper is of a slick finish and the test is made within a reasonable short time, powder can be used successfully. In this case, this box, which is covered with a high-gloss paper, powder is best used. Inside of the box is another story. It is soft cardboard, and oils are readily absorbed into it, which prevents the powder from adhering. So here the iodine fumer is used. It is a glass tube which contains a drying agent to absorb the moisture from the breath, and iodine crystals to produce fumes. When the warm breath is forced through the tube, the iodine vaporizes, and the fumes are blown into the paper. The iodine causes the body oils to turn a dark brown very rapidly, and thus the fingerprint is developed. A gummed label is marked with a case number and investigators' initials for identification of the object to be photographed. This label has a 1-inch scale. The scale and the identification will show in the photograph, and this scale will serve to verify that the print is actual size. If the print is enlarged for court use, the scale will show the degree of enlargement. Powder is applied to the mirror very lightly and the surplus brushed away. The brush is made of the softest camel hair with bristles not less than 1.5 inches long, so the ridge pattern will not be damaged by stiff bristles. The back of the mirror is light in color and a different powder is used. Here the surface is curved and the design around the edges is raised, so the use of the fingerprint camera is impractical. Transparent tape is used and the fingerprint lifted and transferred to the smooth glass surface. In this process, the print is viewed through the transparent tape, and transferring it to the glass does not reverse it or change it in any way. By the old method, an opaque lifting tape made of rubber, similar to tire patching, was used. When the print was lifted, it had to be viewed in reverse, which was difficult to explain in court and confusing even to experts. Scientists are constantly developing new and improved methods of criminal investigation, with the result that a greater percentage of crimes are being solved each year. Law enforcement has reached the point where it's definitely a profession, not just a flat-foot job. If the surface to be photographed is rough or irregular, special treatment may be required. Although the finish may be glazed and smooth, if it is irregular, it cannot be photographed as it is because of the distortion which might be caused. Curved surfaces present a light problem. If the contour of the object is such that the camera cannot be placed flat on the surface, then the print must be transferred to a flat surface. The color influences the photograph materially. The technician must know what results each color will produce on the sensitized film and must select a powder which will give the maximum contrast with the color of the surface that is to be photographed. As soon as the prints have been photographed, both the fingerprint negative and the negative taken by the investigator are developed in the photographic darkroom. The police laboratory is fully equipped to develop prints and enlarge all photographs taken, both of crime scenes and other evidence, also the mugs of prisoners. Here we see the laboratory technician inspecting the negatives after development to see that they've been given proper exposure and are in sharp focus. With the pictures well on their way toward preparation for the fingerprint expert, the technician continues with the examination of evidence. The broken glass submitted is carefully pieced together, just as you would piece together a jigsaw puzzle. From previous experience, he knows that what the complete puzzle should look like, and this enables him to lay the pieces out in their approximate order. They are then fitted together carefully, and the whole pane begins to take form. The small hole which is developing in the center indicates the point where the tool came in contact with the glass. He inspects the beveled, ragged edge of a small piece which fits into the center and sees that the bevel side goes down. By inspecting the outer edges, he can also tell that the upper side of the glass was on the outside. This is indicated by the putty. Raindrops dried on glass also assist in this determination. His training has taught him that when a blow is struck on glass, that the side away from the blow is shattered, leaving a bevel on that side. Thus, after piecing this glass together, he is able to arrive at the conclusion that the blow was struck from the outside. The clay, which was used in recording the impressions of the tool marks in the window frame, is pliable and subject to changes through handling. Also, because of its oil base, it is easily affected by heat and cold and cannot be depended upon to remain constant for any extended length of time. Then, too, it's a negative cast. To transform this into a positive cast and to ensure permanence, the technician makes a positive from this clay negative using plaster. He first builds a frame from strips of tin which are pressed firmly into the clay, allowing a generous margin between them and the cast. They're clipped together at the corners to prevent the semi-liquid plaster from leaking. The plaster is then mixed exactly as when making the cast of the footprint and poured into this frame. The irregularities in the face of the tool used in prying open the window made their impression in the wood, and these are transferred to the permanent cast. A chipped edge, a dent in the face of the tool, the curve of the corners, the slant of the sides, and bevel of the bit, and the accurate width of the mark at various points are some of the details which will serve to positively identify the tool which made the impressions. One can readily see that no two tools would be likely to have all features exactly the same. When the plaster begins to set, the identification is marked on it, the same as when the cast of the footprint is made. In this instance, the technician records the initials of the investigator who made the clay impressions and his own private mark. When this cast dries, it will remain permanent so long as it is given reasonable care, and any suspected tool which comes to the attention of the investigators can be checked against it from time to time. Unlike footprints, tool marks have no limit to the length of time they may be considered of value, for the tool which made the mark is not likely to undergo any appreciable change. The blood scrapings from the window are first dissolved in a saline solution preparatory to making the benzodine test to ascertain definitely if it is blood. If the technician obtains a positive reaction in this test, the specimen can then be sent to a pathologist who can make additional tests to ascertain if it is the blood of a human or animal. If found to be human blood, it can then be grouped as to type. The Wichita Police Department annually makes hundreds of investigations for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They worked in close cooperation with the FBI and are always ready to lend their facilities. The FBI, to increase the efficiency of all law enforcement agencies, and knowing that it is impossible for the smaller departments to maintain laboratories, has set up a complete scientific laboratory. The facilities of this organization are available to every law enforcement agency in the United States. When any local department has evidence which it is not equipped to handle, they may send it to the FBI laboratory, where an expert will make the necessary examination and report the results. When the case comes up for trial, the FBI will, at their own expense, send the expert who made the examination to testify in court. Practically every known science is in some way or another connected with police work. The field involved is so wide that no one man could ever hope to perfect himself in all of them. Chemistry alone has so many branches that several chemists are required to cover the field entirely. The laboratory technician has enlisted the aid of experts in the various fields. He works in close cooperation with chemists, botanists, microscopists, and other science instructors in the universities, and with doctors, bacteriologists, and pathologists in hospitals. These are just a few of the experts whom he has associated himself with for the purpose of obtaining the necessary assistance in his efforts. The proper chemical combination prepared, the technician places a small amount of the specimen on a piece of filter paper and applies a drop of the solution. He then adds a drop of ordinary hydrogen peroxide, and here we see the typical blood reaction, a dark bluish green color. When the plaster cast of the footprint is thoroughly dry, the dirt which clings to it is washed away with running water. If the cast is properly made, the water does not affect the plaster. When the dirt is washed off, every detail which was recorded in the original print is retained in this cast. This permanent record will last for years. From the details in the cast, the technician can ascertain the points of most wear. Any other shoe worn by the same person will show wear in the same location and to about the same degree. Here we see the heel run over on the outside, more the side than to the rear. Note the wear at the ball of the foot and the slightly turned up toe. Also a part of the detail in the heel pattern is revealed. A few strands of the fibers which were found clinging to the door at the scene of the burglary are placed on a slide and examined under the microscope. They're examined for color, texture, and general makeup, and from this examination we may identify the material of which the garment is made, whether wool, cotton, rayon, or silk. These fibers are tan in color and are of various sizes. One of the fibers is brought into sharp focus, and we see that there is a small scale structure indicating that the material is wool. All of the fibers are examined to determine if the material is all wool or a combination of wool and other materials. The variation in sizes of the fibers is no indication that they are of different material, but rather a medium grade of wool. From the general character of the fibers and the degree of curl, it's evident that they are from a garment of soft weave, probably a sweater. The technician will report to the detective that in all probability, the burglar was wearing a tan wool sweater or jacket. If it should become necessary, the fibers can be subjected to dye tests and the dye pigment identified. The manufacturer's identity, as well as the local firms handling that particular product, can be identified. The pocket comb is also given a careful examination. A hair is found, and this is placed on a slide and placed under the scope. Some of the debris is removed from beneath the teeth and placed on another slide. In some cases, hair can be positively identified as having come from a certain individual. This is especially true of hair from older persons where the pigment has begun to disappear. That is, when the hair is starting to turn gray. But in any instance, much information can be obtained from the examinations of hair. The color of the specimen examined will give a definite clue to the hair color of the individual from whom it came, and if several strands are available, this color may be definitely established. The scale structure, texture, and contour of the hair also furnishes clues. For example, examination of the scale structure will reveal whether this curl is natural or a result of artificial treatment. The microscope is carefully focused and every portion of the hair examined. The high-power microscope is so sensitive that upper and lower portions of the hair must be examined separately. By use of the micrometer eyepiece, the diameter of the hair can be measured accurately. Debris clinging to the hair is also examined. It will give information as to the kind of oil or hairdressing used and may, from the type of dust present, reveal the places the subject frequented most. From this examination, it may be possible to gain much information as to the occupation of the individual. Minute particles of steel, coal, dust, soot, debris from various kinds of wood and plant pollen are some of the things which might be found among this debris and thus reveal the occupation of the subject. In addition to chemical and other types of examinations, the handkerchief found at the scene is also examined under the ultraviolet light. Certain minerals and oils have properties which cause them to fluoresce under ultraviolet light. The dark spots seen here are blood. Seminal stains give a bluish white glow, much the same as when a sulfur match becomes wet and is rubbed in the dark.